have these long-term care conversations with your clients. Have them early, have them often. It's not something people naturally want to think about, but it's really going to give them that holistic financial plan that people really need.
All right, welcome to CBS Spotlight. If you are here by mistake, you are in the right place now. This is the podcast that's all about the often forgotten insurance toolbox and how it is there to support you, the advisor, and the RIA in building and protecting your clients and their legacies. I am Michael Corman, and I am with Eric Alvarado.
Thanks for joining us. Happy to be here.
And we are your friendly guides through this world of insurance and wealth management. Today, we are joined by Senior Vice President of State of Affairs and Policy at Finseca, the one and only Melissa Bova. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, Melissa, I know you are here to educate us on long-term care, or LTC, and its current state in the legislative process. Eric, what is our first question for Melissa?
Well, Melissa, can you start by giving us an overview of your role as the VP of the State of Affairs at Finseca and how you became involved in lobbying for insurance and long-term care issues?
Yeah, no, thank you. So I have been at Finseca about 2.5 years now. And Finseca is a relatively new organization formed in September of 2020. But in my previous life, I did not work in this profession at all. I actually was the head of government affairs for the hospitality industry in the state of Pennsylvania where I live. So I was there for 10 years, worked for 15 years as a lobbyist here in Pennsylvania, and I got the industry through the COVID. And at the end of it, I was exhausted and really didn't feel, once you get through COVID with the hospitality industry, you're not quite sure what to do after that. So decided I needed to figure out what I needed to be when I grew up. And a friend of mine who actually works at Finseca said, we're hiring for head of state affairs. And I said, I don't know anything about financial planning, life insurance, or long-term care other than I need it. But I applied for the job and interviewed. And really the mission of Finseca, which is financial security for all, making sure every American has that holistic financial advice they need to help them see through whatever life throws at them, really resonated with me. And as a new organization, it kind of gave me the ability to create something from scratch. So I was Finseca's first vice president of state affairs when I was hired, their first foray into state advocacy. And now I not only lead our state advocacy in all 50 states, but I help guide our policy priorities as well. So as we're figuring out positions that we take on long-term care or anything else that affects the profession, I'm working closely with our team, our VP of Public Policy, to develop those policy initiatives within the association.
Awesome.
So just a minor change from your old situation, then it sounds like.
just a slight tweak. And as I joked, I said, I did state affairs in one state, and somehow taking on 50 states with Finseca still felt like an easier job than hospitality in one state. But it's been truly such a fun job at Finseca, and working with these holistic financial planners, people who are there for you when life throws you a curveball, and the stories they tell and the financial security they provide. I'm really honored to represent this profession across the country.
Awesome.
And I know we're very happy to have you, so thank you very much. So, Melissa, I know Finseca's mission focuses on financial security for all, but how do long-term care insurance and private long-term care solutions fit in the broader mission?
No, it's a great question. And going back to kind of, like I said, our name, which as you mentioned is financial security for all. It means that we want every single American to have the protection that they need when, God forbid, something happens and they need it. So when you think about it, 3 years ago, we all knew you needed life insurance. Everyone was talking about life insurance. Everyone was talking about investments, retirement. But really, in the past few years, as people are seeing their parents grow older, as they're starting to think about their long-term care needs, it's become a really big part of the work that our members do in the services they provide people, because part of being prepared for anything is having that long-term care support and protection that you need when you need it. So it really does align perfectly with Finseca's greater mission, and again, the holistic advice that we want our advisors to provide their clients.
Makes sense.
So 7 out of 10 people over the age of 65 will require some type of long-term care support. How do current public and private long-term care solutions address this significant need, and where do you see gaps in the system?
Yeah, so as I'd mentioned just a few minutes ago, really in the past 2 years, we are seeing, because of lack of activity at the federal level, we're seeing states who really look at long-term care. And again, as we have an aging population, 7 in 10 people, how can you fill those gaps? So we saw Washington State was the first state to develop a state-funded long-term care program. And whether you agree with what they did or not, it really triggered this thought process in other states. So you have kind of this public benefit in Washington State. It's $36,500 for long-term care. Everybody who is listening to this podcast knows that if you need long-term care, $36,500 is not going to provide you with the support and care that you really need. But it has triggered people thinking about the private coverage that gives you that $150,000, $200,000 worth of protection. So these state discussions, whether you like them or not, are really triggering this thought process and making people ask questions and consider it to be part of their plan. So while we saw Washington State is the first and only state that has this type of model, but we've seen discussions in other states like California, Minnesota, New York, Massachusetts, and while none of them have gone the direction of Washington, you're seeing these pop up in legislative conversations. I think one of the big things that we saw Washington try to address, and we saw it a lot in the study that Minnesota did, is what people refer to as the red box, which is people who have between $25,000 and $250,000 in income, and private long-term care isn't necessarily affordable for them right now, which is why states are trying to fill the gap, and it's why we're seeing a lot of carriers develop new products to try to fill the gap as well.
Interesting. Do you see other states following suit like Washington or something in similar vein too?
So it's kind of funny because it's all eyes on Washington again, because Washington actually now has a ballot initiative that would make the Washington Cares Fund, the payroll tax, optional. That will go on the ballot in November. And I think a lot of states are watching that. If people support paying the tax, funding long-term care, I think we might see louder discussions in other states. But if the people in Washington State vote against Washington Cares, vote against the tax, want it to be optional, you're going to have states move a lot more slowly in that direction, as opposed to other options that we think could be viable solutions as well.
Oh, so the rise in Medicaid spending is a significant concern, with long-term care costs contributing very heavily to that. How can private long-term care help mitigate the financial burden on the public system? And what role do you see it playing in future public policy?
Yeah, so Medicaid is the single largest line item in every single state budget. It is where states are spending the most of their money. And when states are trying to figure out how do I save money, how do we cut costs, Medicaid is what they're looking at. And to your point, long-term care is a big part of that Medicaid line item. So I think part of the solution, as we say it, and like I said, if you create a state-funded program, it is not going to provide the long-term care resources that a private long-term care plan can. So even if states try and do a publicly funded long-term care solution, they are going to need supplemental coverage, some type of wrapper, something that will give people that additional support that they need when they need long-term care. So that's why it's part of the growing conversation. And I think a big part of what we're trying to say is we're hearing about state-funded long-term care plans, but how are we incentivizing people to get long-term care? When people think about long-term care, they think of that standalone coverage that was sold 30 years ago, where the premiums were growing up every single year. But
use it or lose it.
Yep, use it or lose it. We have these amazing hybrid products, riders that can go on policies, and maybe we should be thinking about tax incentives to really make it more affordable for people that need it, that might not have the income to buy it today, and that will reduce that Medicaid reliance moving forward.
Interesting. Do you see any of those incentives coming down the road, or is anyone in the Senate or Congress talking about that?
So there was legislation at the federal level that would have allowed you to kind of contribute towards long-term care. They ended up making it taxable, which kind of took away the incentive to do it. And of course, a federal solution would be ideal, unicorns, rainbows, like solution. But the federal government doesn't work very quickly. So I think what we are seeing and what we're hoping states look at is, can they do something within their state budgets that would incentivize it? But a lot of the work we're doing at Finseca in our state advocacy is educating legislators about long-term care. If you talk to a state elected legislator and ask them about long-term care, they're only thinking standalone long-term care products. They're just not familiar with the breadth of products that are out there. So it's really an educational campaign right now. We have at Finseca a long-term care task force that's really working on policy initiatives around this, 101 level education for legislators to get them up to speed. And then that will hopefully lay the groundwork for them to do, whether it's tax credits, whether it is supplementing the cost of long-term care, just kind of encouraging them to be a little bit more creative in this space, because we know the products that the advisors in our profession are offering will provide that true financial long-term care people need, as I said, as opposed to kind of a $36,000 state benefit.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Hey, so, looking forward, what are the most pressing legislative or regulatory changes you believe are needed to improve access to long-term care and ensure financial security for all Americans?
Yeah, so we talked about a little bit about that before. I think incentivizing people, finding ways to make the cost of long-term care more affordable is going to be a key part of accessing people that are in that red box, that $25,000 to $250,000 salary range. But I think a big part of this also is if you talk to any of your friends, other friends, or anyone in brokerage or on the carrier side of things, it takes a really long time for products to be approved. So while carriers are being innovative, it can take sometimes upwards of a year or 2 or 3 to even get a new product approved by a state regulator and available to the public. So I think there's 2 approaches here. One, incentivizing individuals, but also streamlining the ability to get these new innovative products out into the market. And that's really going to give people more access to more solutions as well.
All right. Well, if you were to write a children's book about long-term care insurance, what would the title be and what would the main storyline involve?
So I'm in government affairs, so writing children's books, it doesn't really align with what I do. And I'm not sure how many people
That's very fair.
would buy this book. But so my mom goes by Gigi, so that's what I'm basing my title off of. It can be grandma, it can be Mimi, whatever you want. But because I'm so creative, I would probably title it Time with Gigi. And I would probably base the storyline just off of a grandmother that is getting older and a child kind of seeing that. But because of long-term care planning, they're still able to have the bonding time and the relationship with the lack of stress from the parents. And you can still have that connectivity with your grandmother that you might not have if they didn't have access to kind of the support or the facilities or the in-home help. So just really talking about how this type of planning can allow you a better bond and connectivity with your grandchildren or with your grandparents. So that's the basis. And then I would probably do it with animals, like little baby animals, because That's what you got to do in a children's book. So that's
Right.
That's where I'm going with it.
Right.
I have to admit that answer was so much better than I had ever anticipated. That's really good. So it's about offering. You get to dictate the quality of care rather than offer it yourself. So you can continue having that relationship rather than it all being about providing the care.
Yeah, it takes
Did I get that right?
The whole stressful portion off of there, right?
I'll let you know when I get published.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll help pick out the baby animals.
Yeah. Michael will buy your first book.
Oh, I will. Buy that.
I'll sign it for you, Michael. I'll sign it too.
So, Melissa, what's the most surprising or maybe unexpected thing you've learned about long-term care so far in your career here since COVID?
So, I again really only started working in the long-term care space when I started at Finseca, which was almost 3 years ago. And I had to do a project before I got hired. And the project to prove that I was capable of this job was how I would fix the Washington Cares legislation. So from the very beginning, I was kind of interested in this, but I was surprised and continue to kind of realize so many people don't realize that Medicare doesn't cover long-term care. And so many people think that when they reach that point, their Medicare will cover it. And then they're at a point where they are now driving down their financial resources to have access to Medicaid. And it's really putting people in a really severe financial situation just to get the care that they need. So there's just that gap in place that we need to figure out how to solve for. It's just going to continue to be exacerbated. But that so many people don't realize that their Medicare coverage doesn't provide them that care when they will need it. And in many cases, it may be too late. So that is why I'm so passionate about these products that are out there that will give people that financial support and stability that they'll need. I do not have any children. I'm a truly phenomenal aunt of 2 nieces and 2 nephews, and I do not want them to have to take care of me when the time comes. So I probably wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't gotten into this position and learned about how I really need to start thinking about my future and planning for it.
So for planning for it, your family and loved ones are able to dictate what kind of care you get rather than provide it themselves.
Exactly, and that's fine. Put me in a nice, cushy place, or give me some home care attendants, but let's have my long-term care coverage pay for it so they don't have to worry about it, and I'll force them to come have dinner with me every week. It's going to be great when the time comes.
I like the idea of having dinner with Aunt Melissa. That sounds wonderful.
I highly recommend.
Good.
Oh, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Melissa. Do you have any closing comments for the audience?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. And the only thing I would leave the audience with is have these long-term care conversations with your clients. Have them early, have them often. It's not something people naturally want to think about, but it's really going to give them that holistic financial plan that people really need.
That is some perfect closing comments. Have those conversations. Have that honest, open dialogue with your family so you know where to go. Thank you so much, Melissa. But to everyone else out there, I am Michael Corman.
And I'm Eric Alvarado.
And this is CBS Spotlight and your friendly conversation about insurance and wealth management coming together. But thank you very much. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you all next time.